It is going live. All right. So we are live, you guys. Thank you for joining the Public Health Assuaged team. We are discussing matters involving environmental policy and health today. So I will let our team take it from here. They've prepared an amazing presentation. So excited to share it with you. Yay. Who's oh, are we on who's directing the slides?
It's me.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah.
All right. So the first question that we wanted to ask at the beginning in this is, when you hear environmental health, what do you first think of? And I'll go first, and then I'll let the rest of the panel answer. But when I first think of environmental health, to me, it means like climate change and just the effects that we're having on the atmosphere and literally the environment and the nature around us. And that's my initial thought. What about you guys?
Can I go next? Yeah. So for me, environmental health is like everyone looking healthy, the world looking very peaceful, no violence, full of flowers, blooming. Everyone is happy. We are all living with abundance, and I mean the environment is like human and all living creatures, and that's my understanding about environmental health. Thank you.
Love it.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, environmental health is, one of the things is plant-based, which what we represent is very less taxing on our world as a whole. So if we could be conscious to eat wholesome foods that don't, contribute to animal cruelty, to unwanted gases in our environment, causing pollution and the water inequalities. To me, that's a big part of environmental health.
When I think of environmental health, I think of the different aspects of health that are affected by the environment and how it plays a role in our health. So access to recreational areas and living communities, things like that. And then I also just have images pop in my mind, kind of that you would see if you ever watched the Lorax, where it's just, like a factory pumping sludge into the rivers and the trees being all chopped down. But then the opposite side of that at the end of the movie, where the trees are all coming back and the air is getting clean and people's health is thriving. So I'm kind of that kind of thing.
That's lovely.
For me, when I think of environmental health, two things come to mind. The first one is balanced, and the second one is education, because a lot of people first need to be educated about what is going wrong with our actions, such as with all the air pollution, all the light pollution as well. And in order to be able to take action, one has to know what is going on. And once we become aware of what we are doing and of what others are doing, that is when we can strive to reach a balance between our actions and our interactions with the earth itself.
That's awesome. Lindsay, you want to go next?
Hi. When I think of environmental health, I think of the relationship between the environment and people themselves, and the way they go about people, like the population is actually making the environment good or bad, or how they're affecting it overall.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. That's awesome to hear. Yeah, great, Lindsay. So Luna, you want to go next?
Yeah, so I think health it first relates to just the overall health of our planet, but then it also connects to people, animals, and just kinds of different aspects of our environment all connect together. And I guess it's just everything in the environment and how it connects together.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, definitely. Those are all great, very thoughtful responses. Appreciate it. So now in terms of like what the actual definitions of environmental health are, is that our environmental health relates to the way our environment interacts with us, and if it can either enable good health or increase the risk of disability, illness, and potentially death. Our environment not only includes the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the food we eat, but also chemicals, radiation, microbes, and physical forces with which we come into contact regularly. Our environment varies profoundly at local levels and it consists of many different variables that interact in a complex way and aren't always healthy. Environmental health is very important because maintaining a healthy environment is central to increasing quality of life and years of healthy life. Globally, 24% of all deaths, which is about 13.7 million per year, and 26% of deaths among children under the age 5 are due to preventable environmental factors.
Mm-hmm. That's a great fact.
And then some indicators of environmental health have been outlined very nicely by Healthy People 2020. They developed 6 themes of environmental health. And the first one is outdoor air quality, which involves poor air quality being linked to premature death, cancer, and long-term damage to our respiratory and cardiovascular systems. Progress has been made to reduce unhealthy air emissions, but as of 2008, approximately 127 million people lived in US counties that exceeded national air quality standards. Decreasing air pollution is a very important step in creating a healthy environment. And next we have surface and groundwater, and the quality of this concerns apply to both drinking water and recreational waters. Protecting healthy sources and minimizing exposure to contaminated water sources are important parts of environmental health. And contamination by infections or infectious agents or chemicals can cause mild to severe illnesses. And next we have toxic substances and hazard wastes. The health effects of these wastes and substances are not fully yet understood. Research to better understand how these exposures may impact health is currently ongoing. But meanwhile, the efforts to reduce exposure should continue, and reducing exposure to these wastes is fundamental to environmental health. Then after that, we have homes and communities. So indoor air pollution, inadequate heating and sanitation, structural problems, electrical or fire hazards, and lead-based paint hazards. So people spend a lot of their time at home currently, like right now during a pandemic, also at work or at school. And some of these environments may expose people to hazards, and these can impact health and safety. So maintaining healthy homes and communities is once again essential to environmental health. And then next we have infrastructure and surveillance. So personnel, surveillance systems, and as we said in the previous slide about education, they're important resources for investigating and responding to disease, monitoring hazards, and educating the public. So preventing exposure to environmental hazards relies on many partners, including state and local health departments, and additional methods and greater capacity to measure and respond to environmental hazards is certainly needed. Yep. And lastly, we just have global environmental health. So this mostly pertains to air and water quality because that affects everyone. Water quality is an important global challenge, and diseases can significantly be reduced by improving water quality and sanitation and increasing access to adequate water and sanitation facilities. Mm-hmm. And then next, I thought it was important to mention some emerging issues in environmental health. These issues are continuously evolving as some things become or get resolved and other issues emerge. While these can be difficult to predict, these are the few of the known issues that are currently in the field, according to Healthy People 2020. So the first is disaster preparedness. Preparedness for the environmental impact of natural or human-made disasters, including planning for human health needs and the impact on our public infrastructure, such as water and roadways. This is how this is becoming an issue. The next one is nanotechnology, which isn't one I initially thought of, but I thought was interesting. Nanotechnology is carbon-based material that is used commonly for drug or gene delivery, biosensoring, and potentially cancer treatment. And the effects of this technology in the body and its interaction with our immune systems is inconclusive, as it may present unintended health risks or even changes to the environment. And next is our built environment, such as our proximity to things like grocery stores or factories or parks. They influence our health behaviors, our physical activity patterns, our social networks, and access to resources, which then affect our health. Then we have exposure to unknown hazards. So every year, hundreds of new chemicals are introduced to the United States market, and it's presumed that some of these chemicals may present new unexpected challenges for human health, and their safety should be evaluated prior to release, even though it's not always. And the fifth one we have is blood lead levels. So this is important because as of 2017, there are approximately 4 million houses or buildings that have children living in them who are potentially being exposed to lead. And nearly 500,000 of US children aged 1 to 5 have blood levels at or above 5 micrograms per deciliter. And what that means is that it's higher than it should be. Blood lead exposure as low as 2 micrograms can affect a child's cognitive function, hence its importance. But since no safe blood lead levels have been identified for children specifically, any exposure should be taken seriously. And finally, we have climate change, which is very commonly talked about now. Lastly, it impacts sea level, patterns of infectious disease, air quality, and severity of natural disasters such as floods, droughts, and storms. And the rest of this presentation will be centered around reducing the impacts of climate change and its effects on other parts of environmental health.
Awesome, Ivan.
So I wanted to start off by talking about who is most vulnerable to environmental factors, and that can be like natural disasters, weather, and just stuff like that. So one of the main, categories of people most vulnerable is children. So if a child is exposed to, different chemicals, that will create long-term effects, and it can affect their development. And I also read that children, they're proportionally a lot smaller than adults, so sometimes when they have access to different toxins, like it's going to affect them a lot worse than it could affect someone that's an adult. And then we also have elderly people. They were one of the top groups that had difficulties coping with climate change. I read that they often live in warmer places, which are going to be more prone to high temperatures. So that means they might face the consequences of storms and drought, and that can be really hard for elderly people as they're not quite as mobile. And then we also talked about how people in certain geographical locations can be more prone to facing these environmental factors. And that's simply because different climates in different areas might have more extreme weather patterns, and this is definitely connected to climate change, as storms and stuff can be intensified. So like people in certain like tropical areas may face more tropical storms, and then people, on like the West Coast and stuff might have drought that they're dealing with. And then people with poverty are also most vulnerable because they don't have the resources to cope with the storms and different disasters. So they might have trouble affording food, or they might have trouble evacuating from some sort of natural disaster. And then there's also people in urban settings that are quite vulnerable, and that's just because they're in dense populations. And then in these dense populations, there's an increase in pollution, and then there can be bad air quality, and then that also can lead to negative health effects.
This one me?
Yep.
Okay. Give me 1 second.
It's really amazing points that you guys are making.
It has been an incredible thought process. Like actually, Luna brought this topic, and it's really a much needed topic in our environment now, Cynthia.
Yes, environmental health is absolutely a fundamental part of advocating for health and wellness in general. So I think preparing this presentation and all of us working together, we're a team of students, and so we're getting out there and discussing these matters at a level of wanting to implement policies and just provide that overall sense and knowledge about the environmental matters itself. Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to talk about long-term effects of increased carbon emissions. Carbon emissions have deleterious effects on humans and environments through climate change. The global temperature is on the rise as the solar energy is trapped in the atmosphere. What's happening is overall, our Earth is heating up and it's starting to shift, making like pretty much everything get warmer. So it's making our polar ice caps melt. Granted, it's not going to happen in our lifetime, but it's going to happen eventually. And pretty much, I mean, we would be naive to think that it's, what happened to the dinosaurs won't happen again. I mean, because the way it, they all died and everything heated up, and then everything's expanding, like all of our continents, how they all used to be together in one solid landmass. And then with all the volcano eruptions and everything's spread apart. Well, if you kind of notice, everything's starting to, come back around. And then when it does, it's going to even get hotter. And eventually we're going to not be here anymore. So hopefully we can go to Mars. Anyway, as I'm saying, changing water supplies, demand increases while the supply decreases due to the sediments of the pollutants entering the drinking supplies. Pretty much all of the stuff that we have dumped into the ocean. I mean, that's, and then we clean it, then we drink it. I mean, if you can see all the stuff, I mean, even the stuff that, we flush in the toilet, we take hormones or, steroids or even like pain narcotics. We pee that out and it gets, out into the ocean. Now these fish are starting to look more human. I mean, it's just a matter of time before they actually really start to resemble human or get more human qualities. Extreme weather results in wildfires. California, I mean, it's not good. What was it last year? How they had all the wildfires? Or was that the year before? I don't know. My years are getting close, like since the pandemic, staying home and not going anywhere. With all the tropical storms increasing by 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit over the next 100 years is expected, which of course is probably going to go up more than that. I mean, if we don't go more, granted, you can't make our entire country go solar power. I mean, I lived in Southern Ohio, and that area, well, I only lived there for 3 years, but that area is so dependent on oil and gas, and that's what they all live for. And you take that away, these people aren't going to have anything to do, or they're not going to know what to do with themselves. So you have to like reteach how to live again. So, and that's going to cost a lot of money. So hopefully they are willing to want to do this. I mean, there's a lot of them that don't, so that's going to take a lot. Let's see. Changes in food supplies as climate change impacts growing conditions of food and crops and increasing prices of food. Well, yeah, all of our food prices have already started to go up. I mean, the cost of just getting like fruits and vegetables at the grocery store is crazy. A lot. The rising sea levels and threatening the coastal communities of the freshwater systems. I've seen, I was watching the Nature Channel the other day, and how are they bull sharks that got into fresh water? I mean, they're naturally sea creatures that got into because the water's getting so warm that they're going north, and they're getting into the fresh water. I mean, and their temper. I mean, if you're changing their lifestyle, they're going to attack humans, and it's just, you know, because you're going to change like their entire temperament. So anyway, I'm done.
We need to take actions for all these.
So, as we've been talking about an increase in emissions and stuff like that, we figured we would research a possible policy solution that could work towards saving our planet. And so we wanted to talk about the Green New Deal, and this was introduced on February 7th, 2019. And it was introduced by AOC and Edward Markey. So the Green New Deal is a plan to tackle climate change, and they will do this by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And one important thing about the Green New Deal, is it also addresses societal issues such as racial injustice and economic inequality. And I found that super important just because this is super prevalent in relation to the environment. It's oftentimes certain groups are unequally affected by environmental factors. And so making sure that we address this and address these issues while we address our rising greenhouse gases is really important. So I think Indy is going to go more into what the Green New Deal really is and what its goals are.
Like, you know, like we have given the PDF file of the Green New Deal, the resolutions and all that. So when we see the Green New Deal, it actually goes very much in alignment with Assuaged's mission also. So we are talking about the, you know, like we are basically the plant-based company, vegan company, you know, like a sort of vegan revolution we want to bring about in the world. So like when we see like the Green New Deal is actually like, you know, like what is Assuaged all about? I mean, so when we see the Green New Deal, it's like, you know, like what we want to achieve through this, what the federal government needs to do to achieve this Green New Deal. I mean, it's actually the net zero greenhouse gas emissions. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some economic transformations, transportation policies, and everything. And as we discussed before, the household, everyone, every individual has to take responsibility to bring it to these net zero levels. And you know, like it's not just about the climate change, as Luna said, like, you know, like the Green New Deal also talks about like, you know, like the holistic health, the holistic abundance that we need to achieve in the world. So when we need, you know, like happiness, when we need like, you know, like no violence, then there has to be enough jobs. There has to be enough prosperity for people. So, you know, like Green New Deal also discusses about that. And we are talking about the infrastructure and industry. Unless we are creating that, we cannot create jobs. So in building all this, we have to be mindful of like bringing sustainability into this environmental policies, even for the packaging, you know, like Assuage and many companies, you know, like for our products, we are thinking about sustainable products, you know, like environment eco-friendly products for packaging, because like the plastics and all those stuff has contaminated our environment so much. So we have to bring in the sustainability in whatever we do. We have to be very mindful of that hereafter. And when we think about you know, like ourselves, we have to think about the future also, what we are going to give it to the future generation. So don't we need a clean air and water, a climate, and a healthy food for our younger ones to live after us? So like, you know, like Green New Deal also talks about that, to bring in clean air and water, climate and community resiliency, healthy food, access to nature, and sustainable environment to all the people. And you know, like when we are talking about like happiness everywhere, when we are talking about like, you know, like no violence, then we have to talk about the equity, the equality and the justice that we have to create. Like we know this, the Black History Months that we are celebrating and everything. So we have to treat everyone equally, and like like we have to like repair this historic oppression that's happening in our society. So we have to do this to save all the vulnerable people, bring them for the discussions. Like, so the Green New Deal is all about like it's happiness to everyone. So like our Assuaged mission is very much in alignment with the Green New Deal. So yeah, so let's go ahead.
So it is our mission, to promote plant-based eating. And so one thing that does play a huge role in greenhouse gas emissions is food production. So food production accounts for 30% of global emissions, and livestock production is actually one of the highest contributors, while fruits and veggies are one of the lowest. Food production also contributes to biodiversity loss, deforestation, freshwater use, and land use change. And so basically the food industry has a big role in, the greenhouse gases that are being emitted. And so one thing to consider is eating more plant-based foods can really help the environment. And so basically whether or not you want to, become a full vegan, which I know that's not necessarily for everyone, and it can be quite difficult, even just making those little changes, they will make a significant impact on the environment. In addition to helping the environment, they're going to help your overall health. So it's kind of a win-win. So we just wanted to bring that up and say that just little changes really do make a difference. And if everyone, comes together to help the planet, then we will be able to make these changes.
Awesome.
The importance of environmental health. Hold on a second. Environmental health is part of public health that focuses on people and correlates with the environment. Environmental health is essential so we have clean air, clean water, clean food supplies, so humans that are living are healthy and have a nutritional quality of life and longevity. According to Healthy People, over 20% of all deaths are from environmental factors. Promoting people's health and environment health fosters healthy, positive populations and areas in which they live. Environmental health works to reduce or eliminate chemical exposures, environmental exposures, while protecting the health of the populations. Ways to protect the environment. There's a lot of things people can do to protect the environment. One, you can go on your, instead of driving in your car, you can use your bike, and that reduces carbon dioxide and methane and nitrous oxide. Educating and volunteering encourages participation. Reduce, reuse, recycle prevents the accumulation of waste. Conserving water and preventing toxic waste from entering water supplies helps to sustain aquatic ecosystems. Dangers of sulfites and bisphenol A, BPA. Can't talk today. Promotion of sustainable food sources and shopping wisely. Energy efficient light bulbs reduce energy waste. Planting promotes ecological preservation and natural air filtration, which that's great. I mean, overall, ways that you can protect the environment. You definitely want to, you can go walking instead of driving. Definitely recycle as much as you possibly can, because by doing that, all the water bottles that they recycle. I think they said the number one thing that's recycles that we use all the time is batteries. I mean, if you think about it, and then say like your washer and dryer, you get a new one, that's so much, that takes up so much land in landfill, or so much space in the landfill. I mean, overall, it's just better to recycle, reuse, and anything that you can to help the environment.
So when we get into like some discussion questions, the first thing like our team could think of is like what is that we want to achieve through the Green New Deal? I mean, like it's about like like you have to reduce the global temperature. So because like we are expecting around some 1.5 degrees Celsius to go up, so that's going to cause very severe impacts of climate change. So like how are we going to achieve this? So this is something like that concerned us so much. So like like how are we going to do this? So the few things that we could discuss or like like we have to bring in sustainability and the economic transformation policies. If someone is going to like do the sustainable, take up sustainable options, they are going to incur some cost for that. So unless they're going to get some incentives, like maybe they will lose their motivation later. So we need to bring in some economic transformation policies to help like people achieve this sustainability. So like in achieving this, like like we are trying to bring the greenhouse gas emissions. So the Green New Deal talks about like bringing down 40 to 60% of the emissions by 2030 and bringing it to net zero by 2050. So how is that going to be possible? We have so many things like like we have been discussing through the Green New Deal, that globally how we want to achieve this. The first and foremost like we can talk about is a sustainable farming, where like like we help the farmers to go for like organic fertilizers, organic pesticides, like that's going to be healthy for us also. But as I said before, the farmers need incentives, the farmers need help, like to bring this sustainability to them. And we need technology where we can actually have the soil carbon stored, like when we're going to store the soil carbon, that's going to give us a lot of like fertile soil, so that like like our organic options of vegetables, flowers and all that becomes possible. And when we take up our residential and commercial buildings, they are not at like completely energy efficient. We are not still using all the renewable energy sources, so we have to start doing that like 100%. Like then when we go into manufacturing, there is a lot of waste that are coming out. So like we need to go into clean manufacturing, like the raw materials, everything we choose organic, and like all sustainable options we have to choose. And transportation, of course, we know the pollution that's created by like the diesel vehicles and all that. So like we talk about the overhauling of the transportation, which means like like go for like the retrofitting, all those things to bring in like the clean energy options. And also like all those dump sites, the waste sites that we have to clean up, we have to clean up our world, like we have to bring in this energy in us to like clean up everything and not create more waste things in on our earth. So the next thing is like like we have a lot of technologies, like even in Asian countries, in like in other places, they have a lot of technologies, expertise. So like like when we come together, like as a globally, when we come together as countries, one could contribute the technology, one could contribute the funding, and one could bring the services, like that's how like like we can go ahead. And like we really wish like our country like be like stands as a pioneer in like like bringing this Green New Deal, to bringing all this expertise together, like to achieving this Green New Deal. Yeah. So let's like like dream for that, and one day our dreams might come true. Yep. Nicole?
Okay, hello everyone. So, an article was released in March of 2020 by a publication at Yale School of the Environment regarding how the use of hip hop can help communities of color learn more about the environment and how to further connect, protect, and empower the environment as well as themselves. So, now if we may play the video, please.
Can't seem to hear it. Is there supposed to be audio?
Yes, oh my god.
I'm sorry, I'm able to hear, but how do I do it in the video? I mean,
You know what? Maybe maybe let's try it again.
yeah, can I try one more time? Yep.
If anything, can we link the video to the live stream so others who watch the live, they can access it later?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's copy
Yeah,
the.
sure, we can do that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Oh yes, we can do that. Yeah, I'm sorry, the audio is not coming. I'm sorry about that.
So essentially, after you have watched the video, it is evident that one form of environmental activism is educating the public via artistic forms. Now, what I would have liked to ask the panel or others who are watching is, do you think this method is sustainable enough to reach and convince not only the public sphere, but the political sphere as well? The reason for this is because when it comes to making new policies, it is more difficult to connect with those who are politicians or who make new regulations and laws, because they have a lot of things to consider, such as the economic aspects, or like, is there going to be some sort of like downfall in the end? So essentially, after I guess, like, coming up with new ways to really connect the public, but also connect those who are in charge, people can further, like, also educate, but also come together and to help everyone as well when it comes to environmental activism and protection. And so for the next slide, I don't know if, okay, so the audio's not working. Anyway,
I could try playing the video on my end, but
sure, if you like.
yeah, let me try. So what do I do? Share my screen. All right, so we're on. Is it the same video that we're looking at here?
Yes.
No.
Standing out here in Congaree.
Can you guys
if
hear
I
it?
focus on what I'm thinking, I'll start blundering. But when I look around at the trees, I start wondering. Not afraid of lightning and thundering. Notice me, loving forestry. It never bores me. It holds me, consoles me. And
No.
the other thing that it does, it molds. What is hip hop forestry? It's when two communities come together in one. Everyone is an intersectional being. I'm not just one thing, I'm multiple things. My grandparents taught me through gardens how to love the earth. Hip hop taught me through music how to love people and share their truth. Forestry taught me how to respect the earth. So hip hop, forestry, to me, the way it all comes together is we're bringing people who unnaturally are kept away from something that naturally they should be engaging with, and we're bringing it together. Hip hop is my religion because hip hop is for everybody. When I got into trouble in high school, that's when I started writing poetry.
Yeah, it's not.
My grandma, she was just like my light. When she died, I started writing poetry. I would just write my thoughts on paper.
We did just drop that in the links for everybody, but it didn't seem to share. So we'll drop that in again when we can. Apologies for that. But go ahead and go on. Did you want me to go on the next slide?
Yes, please. Thank you so much. So for the third discussion question, it says we can't see the screen again.
Oh.
Pardon. Okay. So thank you. Okay. So there's this new term called coastal darkening, and it is something that, excuse me, that essentially it means that it is the change in the color and clarity of the water. And this is a phenomenon that can be detrimental to aquatic ecosystems. This has already been noted to occur in rivers and lakes due to fertilizer entering the water and causing algal blooms, and when heavy rainfall pushes organic matter, such as loose soil or decaying plants, into the water. And so this leads up to the following question. What are some ways that coastal darkening can harm aquatic ecosystems? And the harm that can be done includes dropping the quantity of phytoplankton, which is essential for zooplanktons to eat. Decreased light availability can also cause creatures that do not require the use of light to become more prevalent, as creatures that need light begin to die off due to being hunted down by other predators. Another harm is the prolonged existence of methylmercury, which is a source of organic mercury and is an environmental toxicant, meaning it is a toxic substance that was introduced to the environment. Methylmercury could mainly exist longer in waterways if there was not enough sunlight touching the water surface to break down the toxic chemical. So As members of the Assuaged team and of the communities that we are a part of, how can we participate in reducing the acceleration of coastal darkening? Well, there are some examples that we can follow, such as promoting environmental regulations on fertilizer use and advocating to tackle greenhouse gas emissions. We can also employ stricter land use regulations for areas that drain bodies of water, such as rivers. There can also be reducing nutrient runoff, imposing stricter regulations on when farmers can plow their fields, as well as imposing requirements to preserve wetlands.
That's great. That's great, Nico. So can we go to the next slide, Cynthia?
Yes.
Your slide is being shared, Indu.
I'm sorry.
It is your presentation that's being shared.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. So, are you getting the next, Nico?
Yes, thank you. And
Okay,
so
sure.
just for to end this, there's this really cool newsletter called Above the Fold, and it is a newsletter that highlights current topics based on environmental health. The website has a multitude of newsletters that you can look through, which are posted daily or weekly, as well as keep up to date with current projects the scientists are conducting to help improve our planet. And if you would like to subscribe to the newsletter, you can write down the link that's on the right-hand side. And if you would just like to witness the different types of articles that they are posting, you can look at the left-hand side. Thank
It seems that Nico was muted.
Oh, can you hear me now? I'm sorry.
Yeah. No worries. Were you finished with that slide, Les?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Well, that was a really great presentation. I know that all of us, we have such unique perspectives on, public health. And I know one of the comments we got during our presentation was tying in mental health to environmental, because it's being conscious to a level of contributing to the waste and things that are causing pollution and environmental concerns. So if we can just do our part, there are so many sustainable companies coming to the surface. We have this one company that's literally taking all the trash in the landfills, and they're building highways using all of the trash that they compile as a means for concrete. So to me, that's like fascinating. And then they have these boats in the ocean that are going around, and they're cleaning up the oceans, picking up all the trash. I mean, one of the things that kind of disturbs me sometimes is balloons, and mylar balloons too. There are sea animals in the ocean, such as turtles, that swallow these balloons, and then they choke and suffocate and die. So that's just, having a conscious level and doing our part to the best of our ability is really important. And, there are going to be people out there that are not conscious. I mean, I saw a video yesterday that I just couldn't believe it. They were pulling out crabs and ripping off their legs, so to speak, and throwing them back in the water, just as like a funny joke or whatever. But it's not funny. I mean, we need to be conscious and respectful of our wildlife and our ocean and all of these things that tie into health in general. So that's what I have to say. Does anybody have anything to add?
From you, Cynthia. We have to be very mindful as individuals, also as company. Like we have to be very mindful of like what we are doing to our environment, because the environment is where we are all living. So we are all subsets in that environment. So we have a responsibility. We consume everything from the environment, starting from the air, water, whatnot. I mean, everything is coming from our environment. So we need to be very mindful of like what we are giving back to it. Like so as a thank you measure to our environment, we have to take a resolve that we need to protect our environment from this moment on, at least. Yeah, thank you so much.
I had a few things I wanted to add. So it was kind of touched on before, but I think we need to just address it forthright. Is while yes, we should all do things individually to help the environment, we also need to take a stand and call out our governments and the corporations in the world to help with the environment. Because so according to a carbon majors report, it's a report made each year about emissions and global pollution. The carbon major report in 2017 said that industries and big corporations are responsible for about 70% of pollution since 1988. And so, and it's mainly 100 companies that are a part of this. They've done, looked at all the data, all the emissions. And so you'll see, especially at least in California where I am, there's all these like PSAs where it's like, you need to do this, you need to reduce your plastic use, you need to do all that. And while we do need to do that, that's totally looking away from the 70% that is caused from corporations that are not being regulated, that are putting profit above the environment. And if the US and other governments just turn a blind eye and just want to support their funding over the environment, we are all going to suffer. Because at the end of the day, we can only attribute 30% to us, and 30% is not enough. And then lastly, I kind of wanted to touch on the meat industry. So as I said before, the beef and pork are the main cause of meat emissions, like from the meat industry. If you still want to, partake in eating meat, poultry is one of the lower meat emissions, but it's still like, in the range of being like, okay, that's still a lot, but it's still significantly less than beef and pork. And then fish has very low emissions, but when you think of fishing companies, I've done extensive research on sustainable fishing and the current state of our ocean and fishing industries. And unfortunately, we are in a dire state when it comes to that. So when it comes to eating fish, frozen fish, unfortunately, is most likely to be non-sustainable. A lot of the frozen fish fillets that you see have been, from trawling, which is where the boat has a giant net at the back and just drags it through the ocean. It'll hit the floor, ocean floor, it'll just decimate coral reefs and other environmental biomes in the ocean, and it'll catch things from, what they're trying to catch, whether that's sardines or sea bass, but it will also catch sea turtles and dolphins and sharks, and they'll just either kill them for their fins and throw them back, or they'll die like suffocating and they won't realize that they were in the net, and then they died and they just throw the dead body back. So usually frozen fish is from that trawling, because there's so much fish that they get, like hundreds, thousands of fish in that one net trawl, that it's not possible to serve it all out fresh on a fresh market. So they freeze it all. And that's usually what you get in your frozen food aisle. Fish sticks as well, things like that, fast food. So if you really, for fish, I always say go for fish markets, fresh fish markets, where you see the fillets. Usually that's, fish markets tend to work with more local fishing companies that tend to be a bit more sustainable. They don't tend to do the trawling and things like that, and just be really conscious about that as much as you can. And then, of course, advocate for that reform to save our oceans and, save the fishies. So, yeah.
Awesome. Lindsay, what do you think, love? Thank you, Catherine.
Hi. Basically, everybody just needs to be more cognizant of their actions and what they're eating and who they're around, and basically do what's right. You don't want to, I mean, personal, like I don't smoke, and since they've put like a lot of bans on smoking in certain areas, I don't really see that many people smoking anymore. If they made like a big issue about like our environment with everybody else, I think people would kind of start helping or pitching in more. And I like I forget her name, said about, talking to our government and talking to our officials. That's great. I think that would be perfect. And the bigger corporations aren't, first of all, they're not paying taxes like they should, like all the rest of us should, or like all of us pay taxes. They're not. And they're also polluting our environment. I mean, so, I don't think that talking to them, I think it's more of like you have to have like a big like a big party, I guess, or like a community get together and just advocate for it, because I don't think you're going to get your point across just by talking to them, because they hear this stuff all the time. And so I just think it all depends, who's in office and who, you can talk to, and who, you get a lot more on people, So if you know the right person, then that person talks to another person. That's probably your best bet. But our environment, I mean, like I said earlier, I mean, we would be naive to think that it's not going to happen again with what happened to the dinosaurs. So it's just a matter of time before, the whole area warms up and it ends up killing us off. So that's all I have.
Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
Evan, putting you on the spot.
Hey. Yeah, so I actually want to first address Payal's question in the chat. On Facebook, she said, if there's one thing that you could do, you could say to those who don't think that one person can make a difference in saving the environment, one thing that I would say is, do you vote at federal elections, state elections, or local elections? Because if you understand the value of your vote, you probably understand the value of the choices you make every day and how they affect your environment. It may seem like your vote does not matter when you think about just your one vote alone, but when you consider everybody else thinking the same way, that their vote counts or their behavior counts and how it affects the environment, then it begins to add up, and it really makes a difference on a larger scale. So it really comes down to the individual attitude that as long as you're working as a community towards a common goal, then things can get done. So, yeah. And I also just wanted to lastly say, sorry, that we shouldn't sell ourselves short. This is like a very complex issue. As we see, there's a lot of things that go into our environmental health and how it affects other parts of our health. And we should go easy on ourselves and understand that we are working hard and doing what we can each day to try to make the world a better place. So just pat yourself on the back as well.
Thank you so much, Evan. That was just amazing feedback, and just love this team. Luna, I got you on the spot now, love.
So I think the biggest thing to consider is just that there's not one solution to, protecting the planet and environmental health. And so this does go a lot with what Evan was saying on like how every, vote matters. Like everything that you do for the planet matters, whether that's, your eating habits or little things like turning off the light, but also, keeping those corporations accountable. And there's multiple ways to do that. And I think one of the biggest ways to, keep them accountable is through politics and through, passing, bills and different things that are going to have regulations. So if there's regulations on, these big companies, because personally, I'm not sure if a lot of companies are going to want to make these changes because they're making a lot of money off of their practices, even though they are hurting the environment. So really just having those little changes, if everyone, votes to have regulations on these companies, then I think that could make a big difference, along with everyone, making those changes in their daily lives.
Thank you so much, Luna. That's excellent concepts that you provided. So amazing. Nico, got you.
Yes, thank you. So, to piggyback off of what everyone else is saying, yes, advocacy is extremely important. Even though it may feel like your one voice might not be as significant as you might hope it is, once we all work as a collective and we work as a community, it creates a sort of impact that people will notice. And especially when you're targeting policies and politicians who might be hesitant to do any sort of change because they do make a lot of money off of it, sometimes you just have to come up with a new creative format to get the attention of others, especially when it's something that you hold very dearly to yourself, maybe because it's the place you grew up in, or if it's a place that that just really means a lot to you. And yes, if you just, it's about working hard, it's about educating yourself as well as others, but it's not as lonely of a journey as it may feel. It comes with, I guess, like finding others who believe in the same thing that you do, and trying to find ways to make your voice heard, because every voice does matter, even though others might make you feel like it doesn't. So I hope that this presentation was able to inform you all of everything that we were trying to do here at Assuaged, as well as our efforts within the community and within ourselves. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, love. And all righty, we got Soleil, last but not least. So, go. Oh, you're on mute, love.
Alrighty, I'm unmuted now. Just to piggyback off of what everybody said, because everybody made some really great points. It's just really important to understand that everything's connected, and we do have a voice, and it's when we partner up, it's really strong. And little changes go a long way. And if you feel like you're not making a difference, it adds up in the end. And I just want to say, don't give up on these issues, because we can make a change. Thank you, everybody.
Awesome, you guys. We did such a good job, and we're in a learning experience. We're coming on here, and sometimes, it could be a little bit intimidating going out and speaking to the world, but, we're doing this together and collectively in a way that's meaningful to advocate for public health, including environmental matters. So we're going to keep going at this with several topics. We have celebrity speakers on the way, so we will be actively engaging on a weekly basis. If anyone has any requests, please shoot them over to our Assuaged team. Our email is hello@assuaged.com, or you can DM myself or one of the team members. And thank you guys so much for just making an amazing effort to make the world a better place. So, yay. All right, you guys, we're going to sign off, and we'll see all of you later. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.